Do you know all the different ways that kids can be picky about foods? My guess is a few of you do. There are so many ways. We have attempted to offer our kids a wide variety of healthy food options, hoping that they will taste them, hoping that they might even like some of them. We try to include at every meal one food that each kid likes. But this is a daily challenge because Philip and Jack are both picky, but they like different things. This leads to some oddness at our house, or if you want to be positive, some creativity. For example, one kid likes steak and the other likes chicken. So when we have pork, we do not call it pork. If we say we're having pork for dinner, the kids, both of them, go into hysterics. If, however, you tell them that we're having chicken steak, they merely dissolve into whining. When they sit at the table hungry, there's a possibility that they will eat a few bites of chicken steak. They both actually like pork, but they would never admit it. It's a small parenting win. I have yet to convince them, however, that any non-fried form of potato is a French fry alternative. They will not buy that. When the Israelites see the food that God has provided them in the wilderness, they respond, "What is it?" The question sounds like manna in Hebrew. That question can be said with so many different inflections. It can be interpreted in so many different ways. But you know how I'm interpreting it in this house with two little picky eaters. It's not a politely curious question. It's not an open question. It's not even a rational scientific inquiry. It is an angry temper tantrum, shoving the plate away and crossing their arms question. I know this is the case because after trying the manna, the Israelites don't rename it magic bread or fast food or free food or meal with no dishes. I mean, if there's one thing we found from being at home for all this time, it is how many dirty dishes there are. But manna remains manna. The people have food to eat, but they aren't all that happy about it. This story, though, is not really about the Israelites acting like petulant toddlers, because their struggles are significant, much worse than the rare occurrence of pork for dinner at the Siva house. When the Israelites complain to Moses and to Aaron in this passage, it is the second time that they have encountered life-threatening scarcity in the wilderness, in what seems to be a very short amount of time. Almost the moment they set forth into the wilderness, having safely crossed the Red Sea, they complain because they have no water, and God provides them water. Now, though, they find that they have nothing to eat. I have to imagine my way into this story. I've never lacked clean drinking water. Nor have I ever found myself with no food, no access to food, and no possibility of obtaining food. From where I stand, watching their story unfold as God miraculously and faithfully provides all that the Israelites need, it is easy to make their complaints a caricature. If only we had died by the hands of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. You have brought us out into the wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Such a caricature would merely reflect my privilege, not the Israelites' actual suffering, though. Because hunger and thirst are not trivial. And while God provides, God also seems to wait until the people cry out before God acts. I imagine that it takes a significant amount of hunger to desire a return to slavery. I imagine that the people are desperate and fearful. They have been hungry for some time. Perhaps they rationed their food as long as they could, hopeful they would reach another food source, maybe even the promised land soon. But as the food ran out, as they had nothing to feed their children, they look around and they see wilderness. A place defined by its lack of what is needed to sustain life. A place without possibility. The people are brought to despair. This is anything but trivial. God and Moses call the people's cries complaining. This word conveys a sense of obstinacy. They are grumbling, murmuring against the one who saved them from slavery. This portrayal of the Israelites has always bothered me because I find their complaints justified. After all, what good is freedom if they starve? And debating whether it is better to live enslaved or die free misses the point. They are suffering, deeply suffering. My kids are stubborn when they refuse to eat dinner. The Israelites don't have dinner, so I'm not exactly sure how they are being stubborn. It reminds me of the terrible idea perpetuated in our American Christian culture that God won't give you more than you can handle. They have followed God to a place of starvation. The same God who cares for the sparrow, who knows the number of hairs on your head, this God fails to feed the people until they complain, until they point out to God that they are starving. Psalm 105 tells the whole story of the Exodus in brief, highlighting the miracles God does. It glosses over the lived experience of the Israelite people. God does provide food in abundance after the people fear for their lives because they are starving in the wilderness. Yet this story is not all bad in its depiction of God and God's relationship to the Israelites. Through hundreds of years and numerous generations of Israelites, the people have been enslaved in Egypt. Their cries arose to God. Their pain is heard by the Holy One, and God intervenes. And now the Israelites and God are experiencing the struggles of working out their relationship anew. Manna, what is it? What will be the relationship between the Israelites and God? Who are the Israelites now that they are not slaves? What is it? Who is God to them? God brings them to the Red Sea and they are cornered by their enemies. They cry out to God and against Moses as they fear for their lives, and God hears their cries. They enter the wilderness on the other side of the sea. Their throats are parched. They have nothing to drink. They cry out to God and against Moses as they fear for their lives. God hears their cries. They move through the wilderness, and slowly their food supplies dwindle and are exhausted. Their bellies ache. Their children hunger. They cry out to God and against Moses as they fear for their lives. And God hears their cries. What is it? The shaping of a new reality, a new relationship between God and the Israelites. God is the one who hears their cries, who responds to the suffering of the people. We don't really know what relationship the people had with God in those hundreds of years of slavery. Once God had been the God of faithfulness, fruitfulness, the God who blesses the harvest, who gives children, the God who multiplies God's people. At times in the Old Testament, God will be the warrior God who will lead the people into battle. Neither of these images are particularly pertinent here, where there is no enemy, where there is no farming. Who is God in the wilderness? Who is Yahweh? I am who I am. I will be who I will be. I am who I am becoming. Or here's a new rendering of the name that I read this week. I will be what is needed at that time. God in this wilderness is a protective cloud. God is the fire bringing light. God is water rushing forth from a rock. God is bread from heaven. We are familiar with the image of bread, with Jesus being the bread of life. But these other images of God, these embodiments of God, are perhaps not so common to us. God is showing up as what is needed at the time, like manna. The Israelites are unlearning slavery and empire, unlearning abuse and oppression. They are relearning grace and mercy. It is unfamiliar and uncomfortable. It is not the bread of affliction that came from the Egyptian storehouses. This manna bread, like God, is unrecognizable. What is it? In the wilderness of COVID, without the usual touchstones, we may too be struggling to see where God is for us. These Exodus stories promise that God will be what is needed at the time. But that does not take away the wilderness or the struggle. Yet God hears our cries, and God will be what is needed at this time. That manna, it's basic. It's just enough. It does not seem to be tasty or even satisfying. It is merely sustaining. It's the thing that gets them through the wilderness just one day at a time. That's a painful way to live. One day, then one more. Manna is not much, but it's reliable. It is what is needed as the people are shaped by the wilderness, shaped by the grace that sustains them as they unlearn oppression and unlearn empire. Most of us may not be in the position of the psalmist today, able to list off miraculous ways of God that we have seen in our lives recently. That may be years away, even generations away. It may not even come in our lifetime. But we are not without hope, because our God is the God who hears our cries, and our God will be what is needed in this time. We may not like it. We may wrinkle our noses at the manna, but God is with us. God is with us. Amen.
you.